So today, we're going to dive into the book of Judges. But listen, this isn't going to be your typical Sunday school lesson, not at all. We're looking at it as a raw, kind of unfiltered chronicle of what societal collapse really looks like. It's this brutal case study of what happens when a whole nation just loses its moral compass, loses its sense of unity. Really, the whole thing just boils down to this one single chilling question. You could say the book of Judges is basically a 300-year-long answer to it. And trust me, it is a dark one. It shows us in pretty graphic detail how a unified people can descend into just total anarchy. Okay, so let's get right into it. The story kicks off right after the death of Joshua. Now, you might remember him as the guy who led the Israelites into the Promised Land. He was this huge, unifying figure. But the generation that came up after him, well, the text says they did not know the Lord, nor the work which he had done for Israel. So you've got this nation at a massive crossroads, and there's no central leadership to guide them. And right away, we see the first crack in the foundation. It was really a failure of mission. See, instead of creating this one unified territory, what they ended up with was a totally fractured land. Tribe after tribe, we're talking Benjamin, Manasseh, Ephraim, they all failed to secure their areas. So you had these pockets of foreign cultures just embedded right within their own. And this wasn't just a military slip-up, you know? This was the beginning of a huge cultural compromise. This right here, it perfectly captures the warning they were given. Because that compromise, it wasn't just about military strategy. It was deeply cultural. These groups that were left behind, with all their different gods and values, they would become literally thorns in your side, a constant, perpetual snare that was just destined to pull the entire nation apart. So this unstable foundation, it leads directly to a really predictable and honestly tragic cycle. For the next few centuries, the nation is just trapped in this downward spiral that, well, they built it themselves. What you're seeing here is basically the blueprint for the whole era. It's this four-stage cycle that just repeats over and over again. First, there's sin. The people abandon their own culture for local religions. Then, that leads to oppression. They get conquered. So in their misery, what do? They repent. They cry out for help. And finally, deliverance. A judge, who's basically a military leader, is raised up to save them. But, and this is the key, as soon as that judge died, the whole cycle would just start all over again. And honestly, it got a little bit worse each time. All right, so let's actually look at the leaders who came out of this cycle. Because the judges themselves, boy, do they tell a story. They aren't a line of perfect, noble kings. No way. What we see is a series of increasingly flawed, compromised, and, well, often deeply troubled people. Their own personal decline perfectly mirrors the decline of the nation as a whole. The story starts off pretty well, you know? The first judge, a guy named Othniel, he's basically the ideal hero. The text says, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. He goes to war, he wins, and boom, the nation gets an entire generation of peace. Just a clean, straightforward success story. Then we get to Deborah, who was this incredibly powerful prophetess. But right away, we start to see a subtle shift. I mean, she's the clear leader, no doubt about it. But she has to practically order her general, Barak, to go into battle. And even then, he hesitates. He tells her he'll only go if she comes along with him. So that solid confidence we saw with Othniel, it's already starting to fray. And guess what? Deborah's prophecy comes true. The enemy general, Sisera, he isn't killed in some glorious battle by the warrior Barak. Nope. He's killed while he's hiding in a tent by a civilian woman named Jael. She drives a tent peg right through his temple. The glory of the victory is, well, it's fractured. Okay, then we meet Gideon. And now the decline in leadership becomes even more obvious. When he's called to save Israel, where do we find him? Not on a battlefield, that's for sure. He's literally hiding in a winepress, trying to thresh wheat without his enemies seeing him. This is a man who is just defined by his fear. I mean, his own words really say it all. He sees himself as a complete nobody from a family of nobodies. This is a huge departure from the confident leadership of Othniel, right? The very person who's being called to save the nation has completely lost faith in himself and in his people. So he does eventually win this miraculous victory against the Midianites with just 300 men. But the story doesn't end on that high note. After this incredible triumph, Gideon takes the spoils of war and creates this golden idol, an ephod, which then becomes a snare for everyone. All of Israel starts worshiping it, and just like that, they're sent spiraling right back into that cycle of sin.
And the decline just keeps going with the next judge, Jephthah. This guy was a total outcast, the son of a prostitute, driven out of town by his own brothers. The only reason he's brought back is out of pure, raw desperation. The elders needed a hired gun, basically, to deal with their Ammonite problem. So his leadership style, it's purely transactional. Before he even goes into battle, he makes this just rash and horrifying vow. He promises to sacrifice the very first thing that walks out of his house to greet him if he wins. And tragically, the person who greets him is his own daughter, his only child. And in this just shocking display of completely broken morality, he actually goes through with it. And finally, the line of judges just hits rock bottom. We get to Samson. Here's a guy who was set apart from birth by these sacred Nazirite vows. But guess what? He breaks every single one of them. He has superhuman strength, sure, but he is completely governed by his passions, his lust, his rage, his constant need for personal revenge. His actions are never, ever about saving Israel. They are always all about him. When you put the first judge next to the last one, the contrast is just staggering. Othniel's leadership, 40 years of peace. Samson's leadership, 20 years of absolute chaos, all fueled by his personal vendettas, and it all ends in a suicidal act of mass murder. The very idea of what a leader is supposed to be has just decayed into pure, destructive individualism. After Samson, believe it or not, the book takes an even darker turn. That cycle we talked about, sin and deliverance, it just stops. There are no more judges, no more saviors. The last 5 chapters are an absolute free fall into utter chaos. It's a terrifying picture of what happens when a nation is left completely to its own devices. So first thing to go, religion. It completely breaks down. You've got this guy Micah who literally creates his own private religion in his house, complete with a homemade idol and a priest he hired. Then the entire tribe of Dan just wanders by, thinks, hey, that's a great idea, and they steal his idol and his priest to make it their official tribal religion. I mean, everyone is just making it up as they go along. And this chaos, it leads to what is arguably one of the most disturbing stories in the entire Bible. A traveler, a Levite, is staying in an Israelite city. He's shown hospitality, but then a mob from his own people, the tribe of Benjamin, surrounds the house, demanding the host send the man out so they can assault him. And the host, in this unbelievable failure of morality, offers up his own daughter and the man's concubine instead. The concubine is thrown out to the mob, brutalized all night, and left for dead. The next morning, to incite a response, the Levite dismembers her body and sends the pieces to all the tribes of Israel. It's horrific. Now, you'd think this grotesque act would have united the nation, right? That they'd all come together to pursue justice. But instead, it tore them apart. When the other tribes demand that the tribe of Benjamin hand over the guilty men, Benjamin refuses. The entire tribe refuses. They choose tribal loyalty over basic justice, deciding to protect their own murderers. And this triggers a full-blown civil war. The result is absolutely catastrophic. The nation literally destroys itself from the inside out. 40,000 Israelites are killed. The tribe of Benjamin is pushed right to the brink of extinction. Over 25,000 of their soldiers are dead, leaving only 600 men alive. And the so-called solution to this self-inflicted wound is just as depraved. So they realize they've almost wiped out an entire tribe, but they've also sworn an oath not to give them their own daughters as wives. So what do? The other Israelites go and massacre the people of a town that didn't show up for the war, and they take their 400 virgin daughters to give to the Benjamites. And when that's still not enough, they tell the last 200 Benjamites to go hide in a vineyard and just kidnap wives for themselves from a religious festival. I mean, the moral compass isn't just broken, it's gone. It just doesn't exist anymore. And that brings us to the line the book ends on. It's a line that's actually repeated 4 times in these final chaotic chapters. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. It's the ultimate diagnosis, isn't it, for a failed state? And it leaves us with a final, really chilling question. Without shared values, without any kind of unifying leadership, what's to stop any society from doing the exact same thing?